Ladies and gentlemen, BGU Radio is now on air.
Welcome.
Namaste.
Karibu.
Bienvenidos.
Ciao, Mung. We are the BGU radio students from the Stepoke campus studio.
And we welcome you
the 54th Board of Governors
to BGU Radio Live, changing the world.
Please welcome your hosts, Dr. Buzi Raviv, the director of BGU Radio, and Professor Simon Barak from the Jacob Blaustein Institutes for Desert Research.
You're listening to BGU Radio.
Hello everybody, hello to our fantastic audience here in the George Evans Family Auditorium at BGU's beautiful Sde-Boker campus. Simon, how are you?
I'm great, Buzi, because we are back. We're back to Sde-Boker campus where BGU Radio was born. Remember, Buzi? With a small microphone, a laptop, and a few students, it all began. And 7 years later, Buzi, look where we are.
Yes, back where we started.
But not exactly where we started.
Yes, then we were only a garage startup, and now we are becoming an enterprise.
And you are the CEO.
Yes, and I'm so proud and excited to be here on our second BGU Radio Live audience show. Yes.
You know, Buzi, since we were here at the last Board of Governors, it's been a really, really tough time for all of Israel, with the Hamas attack, the hostages, the war, our fallen soldiers, and all the evacuees.
Yes, it's been really, really, really tough. But part of Israel's resilience, and BGU's resilience, is to continue what we always do, to carry on with groundbreaking research that will change the world. And that is exactly what we are going to show everyone here today.
And what a fantastic lineup of BGU stories we have for you this afternoon. We are going to hear from a water researcher trying to prevent a desalination disaster.
We will be paging Dr. Robot to explore the depths of human-robot interactions in cutting-edge medicine.
And we will be meeting a researcher who has developed a homing missile, but not one that kills, one that heals.
And not forgetting our amazing students who will show us exactly what it's like to be part of BGU Radio.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Good. Are you ready?
Our amazing students and 3 BGU researchers who are changing the world.
What a show.
So, Buzi, let's begin. Paging Dr. Robot to the studio. Please come down to our studio. Professor Ilana Nisky from the Department of Biomedical Engineering, and let's give her a big hand.
Hey, Ilana, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. Good to hear from you. We are so happy to have you with us, Ilana. Your research stands at the junction of integrating human senses and robotics. And part of your work involves robot-assisted surgery. So, Ilana, tell us, why do we need robots to aid surgeons?
Well, robot helps us perform minimally invasive surgery, which is instead of opening a huge hole in the patient to get into the surgical area, you are doing with making tiny holes and using long instruments to insert into the body of the patient.
But what's the problem with traditional open surgery?
Well, it hurts, and you open a big hole in the patient, so infection can get in. Recovery is slower. You don't get back to work as fast as you want to, or your boss wants to. And the cosmetics, because if you have these huge scars after the surgery, you wear your entire medical history on your body, and when you go to the beach, everybody knows which type of procedure have you went through.
So there's an alternative for that.
Right, so the alternative is minimally invasive surgery, and this is done with long instruments that are inserted into the body of the patient. But doing a surgery with these long instruments means that you are operating essentially with chopsticks. So the surgeons that use these chopsticks for surgery, they need to learn to write backward, because in order to move the tip of their instrument inside the patient, they need to move in a different direction. Instead of that, robots help in doing it much better.
So how did all that start, Ilana?
Well, they wanted to make cardiac surgery better. And so they were envisioning this idea of operating on a beating heart, and instead of stopping the heart and putting the patient on a hurt lung pump. But as it often happens, they aimed for the heart, but they hit the crotch.
Ooh.
And in the,
Don't like that.
And indeed, the early adopters of surgical robotics were in urology, and 80% of prostate cancer removals, for example, in the US, are done with a robot.
Oh my God, so it is indeed Dr. Robot. It sounds amazing, but what's the problem you are dealing with?
Well, you have to understand, so what is robotic surgery at all? We didn't say that yet. The surgeons control what amounts to fancy robotic joysticks to control the instruments that are inside the body of the patient. Now, they look at the surgical site through the endoscopic camera that is also allowing them to see what's going on, and they see the instruments that are inside the body of the patient instead of their hands, and they feel as if they are immersed into the patient.
It sounds problematic. I mean, how you can control it. So how do you solve that in your lab?
So
there are two main problems, right?
Right. So there are two main problems. One of them is the missing sense of touch. In these systems, they don't feel, can't use their sense of touch. And imagine, think about yourself at a ski resort, and you've just touched the snow, and your fingers are numb. So if you cannot feel your fingers, it's very difficult, for example, to zip up the jacket. Think now about the surgeon trying to do with the same absence of touch information a delicate and intricate surgery. The other problem is essentially this challenge of human-robot interaction that is challenging.
So now I'm very curious. How do you solve this in your lab?
Yeah, so I'll start with something that people are very excited about, which is robots that do parts of the surgery by themselves. And the one challenge that I'm willing to let go and let the robot actually do by themselves is to control the camera. So in traditional robot-assisted surgery, in order to control what the surgeons are looking at, unlike us in everyday life where we can concurrently move our hands and move our head to get a good sight, in surgery they have to stop the control of the instruments and then take over the control of the camera.
So it's like really stop-start surgery.
Right, and you don't want...
It's a stop-motion surgery.
Right, so instead of that, we collect the data, the information about the movement of the robot, and we can use AI to predict when and where the surgeon wants to move the camera and move the camera instead of them.
Wow, so you're using AI to predict where the camera needs to point to according to the surgeon's hand movements, right?
That's right,
Wow,
exactly.
that's really exciting. Mm-hmm. Ilana, there's another issue which could be hugely benefit from human-robot interactions that you told us about. But it comes with some really shocking information. And that is to do with training curricula for surgeons. There is none. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you heard what I said. There is no training curricula for surgeons, and that's pretty frightening. So Ilana, how do surgeons train?
Right, so it's called the apprentice model, and essentially it amounts to see one, do one, teach one.
Sounds more like see one, do one, kill one.
If there are surgeons in the room right now, you can try to catch them later over drink and ask them about the cemeteries of their learning curves.
So, in other words, Ilana, if I need surgery, my default course of action would be to still stay well away from the junior surgeon and make sure I get the head of department, right? But seriously, so what are you doing to change this?
So, of course, we don't want that. We want the surgeons to learn better. And we go back to that same information about the movements of the surgeon. So we can get access to all the movements that they've done during the surgery, and then we can come up with ways to analyze how good they are, metrics of skill. If we're doing this for soccer players, where we're collecting all their information and can predict what they will do in a match, we can do the same thing for surgeons. The other thing is that we can use the robots as something to train on. So instead of actually performing the surgery on an actual patient, you can have them control those same joysticks, but perform the surgery on a simulated patient and do all their training in digital version rather than the real one.
Wow, so improving surgeons' skills has implications all over the world.
Yeah, you actually improve the chances of people to live after surgery.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. And Ilana, I'd like to move on and talk about the other main problem in human-robot interactions that you mentioned, and that's this lack of touch feedback that the surgeon has when they're using the robot. is this something that can be solved?
Yeah, and there are different ways to solve this problem. One of the ways that we're dealing with this situation is actually providing them with the information using stimulation of the tips of their fingertips with tiny mechanical stimulators, so something that moves and stretches their skin. Now, the things that we do differently from other folks trying to do the same things is that we are trying to understand exactly how this information is integrated in the brain of the surgeons, coming up with models, mathematical equations that describe how do you process this information. And then we take these models and use them to improve the way the robot, the skin stretch stimulator, is presenting the information to the user.
Fantastic. I heard this idea of skin stretch stimulation led you to another idea and an amazing invention as part of a joint initiative between Ben-Gurion University and the Adi Negev Nachalat Eran Rehabilitation Village. So firstly, what is this initiative?
Right, so there is this Negev Lab, which is an initiative where researchers aim to take the science and the technology that is being developed in BGU and take it to Adi Negev, to the patients that are going through rehabilitation there to help them.
So what was the new invention? What's the idea?
Right, so I was talking a lot with my collaborator, Professor Simona Bar-Chaim, who is also from BGU, about how we can stretch the skins of the fingertips of surgeons. And she told me that actually a lot of stroke survivors, even though they have a motor impairment, the actual problem is that is sensory. So, for example, if they have a problem to walk, in fact, they are unaware of where their limbs are in space, or they cannot feel the touch of the ground on their feet.
Wow, so how do you actually, did you do anything to help them with
Right,
this?
so what we've done, we came up with an idea to solve this problem by letting them wear a belt, and then sense with this belt they're walking, again, AI to the rescue, to predict their stages of gait. And
so gait is the way somebody walks, right?
Right, exactly. And we can predict where they're, by looking at the signals from the belt, whether their right leg is on the ground or left leg is on the ground or both of them. And then based on these stages, we provide stimulation on their waist. So there's this massage on the waist that will provide them with a substitution of the information about their walking.
Isn't this sounds like science fiction?
I mean, it really does. But, you know, but Ilana, I'm wondering, they have this stimulation on their waist or on their back. How does the actual person interpret that in order to walk?
So this is the cool thing. We trust the brain to figure it out, because we know that apparently our brain is able to comprehend the information without being explicitly told about whatever stimulation they're experiencing, as long as it's linked to some function.
Well, Simon, after all these difficult months, now I can believe again in the human brain.
Human brain, right. Have you actually made the belt? Is it working?
Oh, we did. We worked with designers, so we made...
So it's a Gucci belt?
Well, they wish. So we made it feel nice and look nice, and we actually tried it on patients in Adi Negev, and it helps them walk.
Amazing, 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 amazing. So, Ilana, thank you so much for being with us here and telling us about your amazing research and reassuring us that we might not have to worry too much about the rise of the machine.
Thank you.
Give her a hand. Wow, Buzi, that was great. You know, we've just heard about research on a large scale, right?
Right.
But you and I are molecular biologists, and right now, I'm feeling the need for molecules.
And what kind of molecules would those be, Simon?
I'm talking about tiny molecules, Buzi. I'm talking about nanomolecules, which is what we will delve into in our next session. But all that after a commercial break with our BGU Radio students.
Yes.
Buzz, what are you doing?
Didn't you hear? There are nanorobots doing brain surgery now. I'm gonna be a surgeon!
Buzz, you're a philosophy student. It doesn't work like that.
But isn't philosophy about what you don't know? But what am I supposed to do now?
Well, it's a good thing you're on the radio. Maybe you can become an editor or a broadcaster.
I know! I'm gonna be a radio announcer!
BGU Radio, the best radio in the university, broadcasting to the universe.
And we are back.
Yes.
So, now let's invite our next guest to join us in the studio. Now, Buzi, have you ever heard of the James Bond film, The Man with the Golden Gun?
This James Bond?
That's the one.
Yes.
Well, we don't have the man with the golden gun, but BGU does have the woman with the silver bullet. She's a hunter-killer of disease. She is Professor Ayelet David from the Department of Clinical Biochemistry and Pharmacology. Let's give it up for her.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Hi, Ayelet.
Hi.
Tiri. Ayelet, hi.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. So, you're working on a new treatment for a disease which terrifies most of us, if not all of us, cancer.
Yeah.
So, tell us, Ayelet, what is the problem with current treatment for cancer?
Well, chemotherapy is the most common treatment for cancer. And in general, chemotherapy affects cancer cells that are dividing rapidly. And they try to slow their growth or kill them. And cancer cells are characterized by rapid division, and they grow without any control, so they get affected by this kind of treatments. But the problem is that the chemotherapy cannot distinguish between cancer cells and healthy cells. And in our body, we have a lot of cells that are constantly dividing, like the cells at the base of the hair, or in our gastrointestinal tract, or in the blood system. So these cells also get affected by the chemotherapy, and then patient may suffer from really awful side effects. They may lose their hair, they're vomiting, experience vomiting, and
not only they suffer from the disease, but also from the treatment.
Yes, exactly. And what we try to do in my lab is to develop drugs, or kind of chemotherapeutic drugs, that will go directly to the tumor tissue and will leave the healthy cells unaffected.
So what's that silver bullet you have in your belt?
No, because it's not a belt. You're still stuck in Ilana's interview. She has a gun.
Oh, all right. I clearly live in the past. Ayelet, what is the silver bullet you have in your gun?
Well, what we develop in my lab is like polymers or nanopolymers.
Nanopolymers?
Yeah, it's
what are nanopolymers?
Nanopolymers, it's like a tiny polymers. It's polymer at the nanometer size. So first, what is a polymer? A polymer is like a chain. It's built of, it's a large molecule that built of multiple identical repeating units that are linked together. And the term nano refers to the size. It's like unit length, and so our polymers, the polymer that we develop in my lab, are at the nanoscale. They're 2 to 5 nanometer, which means that they are really tiny.
So can you give us an idea of the scale of that?
For example, COVID-19 virus, so our polymer is like 50 times smaller than a virus.
So that's really small.
It's a small, yeah, but it's a big drug. Why? Because it's significantly larger than the conventional chemotherapeutic drugs. So what we do in my lab, we take this polymer and we attach the chemotherapeutic drug to the polymer, and then we get a big molecule It's tiny, but it's big. Why big? Because when we injected or when we administered to patients, it's stayed in our blood system because of its size, it cannot leak out and reach healthy organs and tissues. But we do want it to get to the tumor tissue, and since the blood vessels, the architecture of the blood vessels is irregular, the blood vessels in the tumor tissue are more leaky, like there are holes, they're like drippers, and so this large molecule can actually leak out, and we bring more drug to the area of the tissue while sparing the healthy cells.
So you tried it, and did it work?
It worked. The drug was more. It was safer and less side effects. But
that's good news.
Yes, but unfortunately, we couldn't demonstrate a clear benefit over the conventional chemotherapy. And then we realized that we need to improve our system. We need to come up with something that will give an added value.
You know, actually, Ayelet, that's something I love about science, is when something doesn't work as you expected, and then it leads you into like a whole new approach. So what was the new approach?
We decided this time not to try and bring more drug directly and hit the cancer cells themselves, but rather try to selectively kill the blood vessels that feed the tumor. And by doing that, we can cut the oxygen nutrient supply to the tumor tissue, and it could, if we can actually trying to suffocate the cancer.
You actually put the tumor under siege.
Exactly, and if we can hit or kill the blood vessel, it can be translated to the death of hundreds and thousands of cells.
And was it just the primary tumor, or did you manage any like the secondary tumors?
Well, we actually treating the metastasis, which is cancer cell that is spread all over the body and settle down in other organs. This is the most challenging, and this is the main challenge in treating cancer.
The lethal stuff.
Yes. So we want to target the blood vessels, but we have blood vessels all over our body. So we looked for a specific marker that is not expressed on healthy blood vessels, but it's expressed exclusively on the blood vessels in the tumor, primary tumors, and also in metastasis. And we identified such a protein, and that was the target for our silver bullet.
Wow,
that is so elegant, you know?
Really, really. So in other words, what you're doing is you're targeting the cancer drug directly to the blood vessels that supply only the metastatic tumors. Mm-hmm. And what were the results?
So first of all, in order to do that, what we had to do is to modify our polymer. So we took this nanopolymer, we attached a drug, and we also attached another molecule that can bring the drug directly to that protein on the blood vessels in the tumor.
Silver bullet.
Silver bullet, yeah. And the results were really exciting for us. What we found is that we cannot only cure primary tumor, but that we can actually treat in mice. We did experiment, and not only primary tumors, but also mice with very advanced cancer that was metastasized to the lungs and the liver, and that was that's of course the main challenge in treating cancer.
Give it to us in numbers.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. So what we found, for example, we decided to treat mice that already had metastasis of colorectal cancer in the liver. And what we did, we injected this nanopolymer, a single injection, treated the mice, and then what we got is like half of the group of the mice that were treated with the polymer were cured, meaning there was no recurrence of the disease after 100 days, and they looked very nice and happy and didn't suffer from side effects. And in the other half of the mice, we could actually prolong their survival like twice the time, like we can double the survival time of these mice when compared to the conventional chemotherapy.
And is 50% large in a trial?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's like after a single drug treatment, a single administration, it's amazing. And usually, you know, there are no current available good treatment to treat cancer that it's already spread to the liver and other organs.
Did you try more than one injection?
We did. We actually did in a different model of cancer, of aggressive skin cancer, which is melanoma. This melanoma tends also to spread around and settle down in the lungs. So we treated mice with already existing melanoma lung metastasis. After a single injection, 50% of the mice survived, half of them. After 2 sequential injections, 80% of the mice survived.
80%.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's and that's fantastic because we can control even cancer that already spread out to other organs.
Amazing.
Amazing news.
Ayelet, you have this nanopolymer that carries the drug directly to the blood vessels of the metastasizing tumor. But as a scientist, I'm really curious to know, you're targeting the nanopolymer to a protein on the cancer blood cells that's being expressed only on the cancer blood cells. How do you know it's the nanopolymer itself that's not having an effect?
So we did test the effect of the polymer without the toxic drug attached, and this polymer actually doesn't have any toxic effects. But we knew that this protein that we are targeting at this on the protein on the blood vessels of the tumors blood vessels, this protein actually facilitate the formation of metastasis. So it actually helps if there are circulating cancer cells in the blood system. It helps them to get out of the blood system and settle down in other organs. So what we decided to do is to test if we can take just the polymer without any chemotherapeutic drug attached and can block the activity of the protein with the drug-free polymer, what we call it.
So a drug-free drug?
Drug-free drug.
Wow.
I'm curious to know what happened.
Well, what we did is like we also pre-treated the mice. So we gave the mice the polymer before injecting cancer cells. And what we found that in the case of melanoma, the number of lung metastases was significantly reduced. And the reason for, like, your audience may ask, why do we want to pre-treat? And the reason, or the start of about it was that, for example, in many cases when a patient can go to a surgery for removal of the primary tumor, so sometimes during the surgical procedure, some cancer cells escape from the primary tumor, get into the blood system, and then settle down in other organs. So our thought was to give the patient a drug, the polymer without a drug, so it doesn't have any side effects, and just potentially block the metastatic spread of cancer. And at least in mice, we showed that this strategy indeed works.
Wow, you're not only curing metastasis, you're actually preventing it. That's mind-blowing.
We're preventing the spread of metastasis.
Yes. Yes. Amazing.
Thank you.
Ayelet, this is pretty incredible stuff. When are we likely to see it, like a commercial treatment in humans or any clinical trials?
So there is a company that that is currently working on the development or promoting this drug towards clinical testing, meaning to test its efficacy in humans. So we are currently synthesizing a large amount of polymer and testing the safety of the polymer, and hopefully next year we will hopefully to start also studies in humans.
Can I join these trials?
I hope you don't have cancer.
But I want to prevent it. Okay. Ayelet, we will be eagerly waiting to see the results of the clinical trial and see what happens. Your research is fantastic.
Thank you.
You've been fantastic. Give her a hand. Thank you so much.
Let's give it up for the woman with the silver bullet. Well, ladies and gentlemen, so far we've heard today about research on two different scales, from nanomolecules to robots. But in our final session, we're going to deal with huge structures and tiny pores, and hear about what you don't know about desalination. But before that, Buzi, I'm wondering how Boaz, our philosophy student, is progressing to becoming a radio announcer.
I'm very curious.
You want to find out?
I really want to find out.
Okay, so let's hear a short message from Boaz.
Yael. No, Boaz, you can't cure cancer.
I just wanted to tell you, I've been practicing my announcer voice. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Buzi and Simon.
BGU Radio, where creativity meets academia.
So, Buzi, how do you think Boaz is progressing as a radio announcer?
I think he's really handsome.
And he sounds quite good as well, right?
Right, even better.
Cool, so we're back. And, well, we've heard in our previous two sessions about robots and silver bullets. And now, we are going to encounter the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Well, more accurately, a researcher who is trying to prevent a desalination Dr. Jekyll from becoming an environmental Mr. Hyde. So it's our great pleasure to invite to the studio from the Stebokar campus, Professor Bar-Zeev of the Zuckerberg Institute for Water Research. Let's hear it for him.
Let's do it, Simon. Wow, look at him go!
Who goes?
Okay. Ido, how are you?
Fine and dandy.
Good, good. Dandy. Okay, it's great to have you with us. Now, Ido, you're no stranger to BGU Radio, right?
Yeah, we had a fantastic time last time.
We did. We had a fantastic interview with you on the Stebokar Speaks podcast about your experiences after the 7th of October. I highly recommend anyone to go to our website at BGU Radio and listen to this fantastic interview.
Important one.
So, Ido, you've described desalination as being the benevolent Dr. Jekyll and that you are trying to prevent become the evil Mr. Hyde. So what do you mean by that?
Well, desalination is one of man's wonders. We make water, fresh water. In the last, I would say, 30 years, Israel is no longer under water crisis, which is amazing. Currently, all of us here in Israel are drinking something like 75% of fresh water from the sea.
Wow.
Amazing.
That's amazing. Is it likely to go up in the future?
Well, yeah, we are foreseeing that Israel will become totally dependent on seawater desalination by 2030, meaning that everything that you guys will drink once you come here then will come from the sea.
Amazing. So where is Mr. Hyde here?
Well, when you draw 1 liter of water from the ocean, from the sea, to desalinate it, half of it we drink. But the other half is that Mr. Hyde, because that's a super saline solution that is being discharged back currently into the aquatic environment, basically our coasts.
So the hypersaline solution, that's very, very salty water, right?
Yeah.
Super salty.
I would say pickled one.
Is it like brine?
Super brine.
Okay. Okay, so the effects of this brine on the marine environment, are we likely to see sea cucumbers becoming sea pickles?
That's a nice analogy. I did not think about that. So once this brine is being discharged into the ocean, it's not just hypersaline, but there are other chemical additives that are going and flowing with it. And yes, we see an impact to the surrounding environment, roughly 1 to 2 kilometers off the discharge area. However, a new research published about 2 years ago by modeling saying that the impact could be for a few tens of kilometers, basically in Israel, over the continental shelf.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do we need to stop the desalination process?
Well, you cannot. That's why it's Dr. Jacob. I mean, we cannot go without desalination, not in Israel and definitely not in the US. Hopefully you guys are following us. So we cannot go without it. So the main reason or the main aspect that we're trying to do is trying to minimize the environmental footprint, basically squeezing down Mr. Hyde.
And are you trying to find any operative, well, first of all, what is the actual effect on the marine environment?
So that's a good question. We have looked into it for the last, I would say, 7 to 10 years, and we found that the impact starts really at the base of things, really at the geochemistry within the sediments, next to the desalination facilities, but up in the food chain through seagrass, for example, that are very important for the ecosystem, providing nurseries for fish and oxygen for the water column, and even up to corals, where we found that it makes coral bleaching, and a lot of areas are heavily dependent on aquatourism, such as the Gulf of Ayelet. So it goes up from really the bottom and through the up to the food chain until fish.
So that can have really serious effects on the whole of the marine ecology.
Marine ecology and back also to us.
Back to us, wow. And are you trying to find any operative solutions to prevent this damage to the marine environment?
So these days, one of the main strategies that operators trying to get are something called ZLD. Do not be alarmed from this acronym. It's zero liquid discharge. We want to minimize the volumes of this brine, this pickled brine, getting into the ocean.
And how are you trying to do that?
Well, there are a few operating approaches. In our group, we're trying to use something called membrane distillation. So in that respect, what you're trying to do is warm up just a little bit this brine, have it forming vapor pressure over these membranes. You need to think of this kind of a bag with holes that hates water, so it's super hydrophobic. So only the vapors pass through these smart bags, and then you condense that and get the fresh water out. So you keep squeezing the water until it's really saline, and then you're trying to mine the nutrients that are left there, or precious metals. So this is the future of that.
So so if you're mining salt, you're mining the precious metals from the brine that's left. Is that economical?
So one would think yes, but at this stage, no. This is something that is being developed. I would see that it will become more commercially available, let's say in 10, 20 years. So in the meantime, to minimize this Mr. Hyde, what we need to do is subsidize this ZLD procedures. So even if it's not economically viable, still what we want to do is save our environment.
Right, wow.
It sounds super important. You know, I'd like to turn to the other side of the coin. You talked about the damage that the desalination factory is doing on the marine environment. It goes in the other way around, like damage that the marine environment can do to the desalination?
So for sure, if we are dependent on seawater desalination for our freshwater, and freshwater obviously it's very important, we need to safeguard also the coastal environment because we're drawing water out of it. So if the water quality in the coastal environment drops, then the efficiency of the process is being impaired. So that's something that we need to think. For example, you can think of if you dump sewage into the ocean and now you're drawing it back, that will cause something. Or if you have jellyfish swarms due to climate change, again, across our coastal environment, and you're drawing those jellyfish in, those will basically, in late term, plug the desalination process.
What about oil? Because, you know, we have this, they want to expand the pipeline, right? The oil pipeline from Eilat to Ashkelon, which could really increase the potential for an oil spill. What would happen if there was an oil spill?
So an oil is one of devil's advocate for desalination. We are very scared out of it because there's no contingency plan if there is an oil spill over our coast in terms of desalination operators. So an oil spill, if it enters in some aspect into the desalination facility. According to operators, this will hold production for 6 to 9 months.
6 to 9 months?
That's a lot of time without water.
That would be a disaster.
For us, sure is.
So are you trying to develop something that will prevent the oil getting into the desalination plant?
Right. So together with Dr. Eyal Rahav from IOLR Haifa and Dr. Avner Ronen, actually from the Zuckerberg Institute for Water Research here in BGU, we're trying to develop smart barriers. Smart barriers because we want water to pass, but to absorb all oils and safeguard the pretreatment and the desalination process following that.
Wow. So that's not a trivial thing, though, right? To get oil, you've got sort of a membrane that's going to stop the oil getting in, right? But the water coming through, right?
Something like that. I mean, to block the oil together with the water is easy. But to let all the water pass and just take out the oil, that's a different aspect.
That's really not trivial.
But that's why the barriers are smart.
That's true.
That sounds futuristic and super important, and you are leading this research. And does that say something about Israel as a leader of desalination?
Yeah, I would say Israel is basically a superpower in terms of water. I think that one of the main reasons why it is because our logo, Ben-Gurion. In the 60s, him and his colleagues coined that water would become a strategical asset, which is very unique as a young state to coin that. And with that, there are a lot of things that are related to that. For example, management and thinking forward and planning, thinking ahead in terms of our water management scheme.
Wow, you know, Ido, it's amazing that everything always comes back to David Ben-Gurion, right? And his foresight. Actually, it reminds me of that very famous quote from David Ben-Gurion where he said, it's not enough to be up to date, you need to be up to tomorrow.
For sure.
And Ido, you really are up to tomorrow.
Thank you.
2030 at least.
Yeah. So Ido, it's been fascinating. It's been fascinating to look at the other side of desalination that we really don't think about.
Right, that's right.
And you're really the guy who's saving our lives.
Me and many, many, many others.
So Ido, thank you so much for sharing your amazing work, and let's give it up for him.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's have our final commercial break now and see what Boaz and his friends have been up to at BGU Radio, and then we'll be right back with some final words.
After the events of October 7th, we started to think, how can we help using the tools we have as a radio station? It was clear to us that the radio is not only a place for sending a message, but it's also a place that allows expression in a healthy way.
That's why, soon after the attack, we gave the children of Beersheba an opportunity to be part of the radio. As an Israeli citizen, it was very hard for me not to know what the future holds. My routine was ruined, and as a teacher of 102 students from the ages of 8 till 16, I couldn't think to myself what they are going through. I wanted to give them an opportunity to escape, to do something with their voices, to express their fears and emotions, bring a little bit of normality into the crazy reality we are in, and maybe even some normality for myself.
We'd started creating shows and activities which allowed them to have a voice during an unspeakable time, as well as a release from the reality of being in a shelter for months during the war.
I've seen the kids smile for the first time since the attack and having a great moment. I couldn't have done it without Boaz, Buzi, and each and every one of you in this room, and for that I'm very grateful. Thank you.
ילדים קטנים, ילדים גדולים, ילדים טובים וילדים רעים. את יודעת אמא, כולנו ילדים של החיים. כולנו ילדים של החיים.
BGU Radio.
You see, ladies and gentlemen, BGU Radio started as a humble dream, but became a path to fulfilling other people's dreams, a springhood for a real career.
Even for philosophy students.
They are the best. So please give a big hand to Boaz, Yael and Artyom, our students who produced the films. That was their true story.
So that leaves us just to say a big thank you to everyone who's involved in BGU Radio live show.
Our wonderful researchers who are changing the world. Professor Ilana Nisky.
Professor Ayelet David.
And Professor Bar-Zeev.
And our BGU Radio Steboker Studio students.
Asha Sastya.
You got a big one. Hun Moin.
Devi Orozko.
And Henry Rajoro. And our amazing BGU Public Relations and Media staff.
Hadas Moshe.
Osnat Eitan.
Noah Fisherman.
And Keren Ben Abu.
And of course, to you, our fantastic audience. Thank you.
Okay, it's just some quick information about the next session.
Before the next session. This would not have ever happened without the initiative of these two people 6 years ago in Steboker who dreamt of a radio station.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Endowment, which enabled us to build the station at the Marcus campus, which was fulfilling a dream for them. It's been funded through small donations and through partnerships, and the Marcus Endowment has been allocating, and A4BGU has been allocating for it. But if you by chance know anyone who radio is the most important thing, it's still an unnamed radio station. So thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
For
Give them the
help.
message, Simon.
Absolutely. So, just some quick information about the next session. We'll have a short break now, and then we'll meet back here for Academia in Transition, a conversation between two presidents, Professor Michael M. Crow, the president of Arizona State University, and our own Professor Daniel Chamovitz, president of Ben-Gurion University.
So, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him. Goodbye.
Goodbye.